Hi, it's Mark from Top Local. We're here with Bernie Pawlik, Pawlik Automotive in Vancouver, Vancouver's highest rated and best reviewed automotive service company. How you doing, Bernie?
I'm doing really well.
So we're going to talk about a BMW, a 2005 330. What was going on with this car?
Well, this car had came into our shop with quite a bad coolant leak, and it had actually to the point where I think the owner was driving down the highway and the engine actually stopped running because it got pretty warm and shut down, which is a good thing before it destroyed itself. But yeah, the main reason it came in is for a coolant leak.
So is there, I'm going to digress for a second. Is there a reason why it was shut down like that? Is there electronic protection that would shut it off?
I suspect that's probably the case, although I don't know for sure, having not driven the car. I mean, it didn't seem like it'd been. I mean, a lot of cars, if you overheat it to a certain degree, it'll actually stop because it's can't physically run anymore. So I'm not sure whether BMW has that capability. It would be a good thing because we do fix cars where people have overheated them to the point where they've cooked their engines. So it's not a good feature. So definitely a good
So where was the coolant leak coming from?
The coolant leak was coming from the coolant overflow bottle, and the bottle had basically split suddenly. And this is a pretty common issue that we see in these vehicles. So yeah, I can share a couple of photos. Actually, hang on, we'll get to the photo share thing. Just a second here. Okay, there we go. There's a BMW engine compartment with lots of plastic pieces. And before we look at this, I'll just show, this is the coolant overflow bottle that was cracked. This sits in the side of the radiator. The red arrow points to a big, long crack along the length of the bottle. And we do see these from time to time. It's fairly frequent once the car gets a little older. Plastic, it's brittle, it's under a lot of stress. On BMWs, there's a lot of plastic in the engine compartment. This is a view of the top of the engine, and pretty much everything black that you see there is made of plastic, with the exception of a piece that runs along the sort of lower portion of the photo, a long piece that runs from left to right. That's a metal piece painted black. But pretty much everything else you're looking at is in black is plastic. There's the intake manifold is on the right near the back. The big BMW word, that's the valve cover area, that's all plastic. And at the front is the radiator. It's kind of buried and hidden, but to the right, you can see a sort of round piece with right sort of lower corner. That's where the radiator cap is, and the overflow bottle we replaced is down there. So these are many of the plastic pieces that they have on this car. So I will stop the sharing, come back and talk.
So all of this plastic, because engines are hot, plastic doesn't do all that great with heat, repeated cooling. So that seems like not a great idea. Why are they using so much of it?
I think weight reduction is probably the biggest reason, but plastic is also highly moldable. You can mold it into any shape, and so it's helpful for certain things that require flow of liquids, flow of air, and it's, I think, increasingly cheaper to work with than it used to be at one time. But I think weight is the primary reason. I mean, in all fairness, plastic nowadays isn't what it used to be 30 or 40 years ago, where you couldn't even make anything. I understand they even have plastic pistons in engines, although I've never seen one. But I think for high-level racing, they're actually used, or it's experimental anyways. But for a lot of parts, they work fine. But there's only a certain lifespan, and plastic, unfortunately, tends to fail rather suddenly. We have, like this coolant overflow bottle. Basically, we had this vehicle actually in for service the day before it came back for this leak, and the thermostat housing was leaking. We did a number of repairs on the car. And I mean, unfortunately, the car came back the next day with this big coolant leak. The day before, we replaced the thermostat housing. We pressure tested the cooling system. There wasn't a drip of coolant or a leak coming out. Next night, he's out driving on the highway, the bottle splits, and without any warning. So almost with a BMW, when you get 10 years old, it's not bad preventative maintenance to just start changing some of the plastic parts. The radiator has plastic. The overflow bottle is plastic. Of course, a lot of the coolant hoses even have plastic ends. So it's great. You can clip these pieces together. You know, from a manufacturing perspective, it's amazing. But once it gets a little older, after you said like a lot of heating and cooling cycles, the plastic gets brittle and it breaks.
So are there metal replacements available for any of these parts?
Some of them there is, not for the radiator and not for the overflow bottle or the hoses for that matter, but there are, for some models, there are thermostat housings that are available. Not for these newer models though, but some of the older ones you can get metal thermostat housings. Water pumps are one thing we always, water pumps themselves are made of metal, but the impeller, the blade that turns inside the water pump, it's a lot of European cars use plastic impellers. We've even seen them on medium-sized Isuzu trucks as well, which is kind of shocking. But the thing about plastic impellers is they just crack and break without warning. So you have a water pump it looks on the outside working perfectly well and isn't pumping any water. So with these wheels, replace with a metal impeller. So again, the reason they use plastic on these is just simply weight reduction, but they fail, you know, and that's you know, without warning. So yeah,
So how was the customer? You'd done a bunch of work. Their car basically broke down on them the next day. What happened with that?
Well, I mean, for us, it's always highly embarrassing because you know, for the kind of work we try to do, you know, with everything we do, we like to be very thorough and make sure we've covered everything, you know, without, of course, selling the person a brand new car when we do a repair, doing it in the most reasonable way. And, you know, it's rather irritating for the customer and for us when the car gets towed back a day later. You know, what we did for this customer is we replaced the parts. We didn't charge him any labor. It took, you know, it was a few hours worth of work that we did for no charge. We did charge him for the parts because it wasn't our fault that it failed. But to me, I'm just interested in customers being happy with what we do. So we replaced the parts and took the car out for a very long road test to make sure there wasn't some other issue causing the vehicle to shut off suddenly. So we're pretty satisfied. We inspected everything and it all looked to be pretty good. But this is the kind of thing we do in certain cases where it's not our fault, but I figure, you know, the car's just been in, they've spent a bunch of money, why not just do a little extra to make them happy?
That sounds pretty fair.
We try.
So if you're looking for a fair and useful and honest mechanic, honest maintenance place for your high-end vehicle, your low-end vehicle, doesn't matter what kind of vehicle it is, from diesel to high-end Mercedes. These guys repair it all. Pawlik Automotive in Vancouver. Give them a call to book 604-327-7112 or check out their website, pawlikautomotive.com. Thanks, Bernie.
Thanks, Mark.